Luno, the fastest, easiest way to buy Bitcoin. If you're just getting into crypto, it's the perfect place to start. Hey guys, and welcome back to my show. As always, it is powered by Icon Plus. So a really quick news announcement for you. So Korea's largest mobile phone provider, Denal Fintech, will actually support ICX as payment method this year and launch a prepaid crypto card with China's Union Pay. So really exciting there. Now, this is sponsored by BlockFi. You can get up to 8.6% interest on your USDC. And it is also sponsored by CoinFlip. So I will leave a link. You can get a discount code. So I'll leave that scrolling at the bottom in a minute. Now, if you are watching on YouTube, please don't forget to hit the like button and hit subscribe because you never want to miss any of these fantastic guests. Now, let's jump straight into this because joining me today is the founder of the global alternative investment firm Skybridge Capital and Salt Conference, and he worked famously as the White House communications director under President Trump in 2017 for just 11 days. I'm sure you can guess who it is. It is Anthony Scaramucci. How are you doing today?
Well, at least you got the time right. You know, some people say 10 days, Layla, and it hurts my feelings. So I appreciate you mentioning the last day. Of course, in the last day is the one I probably the most famous for. That's the one where I got fired, summarily fired. So how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. How are you doing? Thanks for joining me.
No, I'm terrific. It's a big opportunity right now in the crypto space. Obviously, there's lots of things going on, and lots of institutions are joining. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, it's pretty insane, and I do want to jump into all of that. But before we do, I did message you before the interview, and I asked you, "Is anything off limits?" And you told me no. You told me no, which
no,
is
nothing's off limits. Of course not. Why would there be anything off limits? That's not fun.
I love it. Cool. So before we jump into Bitcoin then, I do want to just jot back to 2017. Can you give us a brief overview of what happened and why you were only the comms director for only 11 days, not 10, but 11?
Well, I have to probably take you back to 2016 then to apply context. I was a lifetime Republican Party fundraiser. Mr. Trump was running for office. None of us took it seriously. I was working for Jeb Bush. Jeb came out of the race. Mr. Trump recruited me. I made many colossal mistakes, but my first one was accepting his invitation to join his campaign. We then won the presidency, which seemed very unlikely on November the 8th, election day, 2016. But then further to complicate things, he wins, and then he names me to his 16-person executive transition team. So I was one of 16 people on his executive transition committee, picking the cabinet, interviewing undersecretaries and so forth. And then he offered me a job. The original job was to be in the networking area of the White House, which is called the liaison department. So it's sort of like a global liaison coordinator. Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon, two of my nemesis, they didn't want me in that job. I didn't realize at the time how cutthroat. I thought Wall Street was cutthroat, Layla, until I got to Washington. I tell my buddies on Wall Street, I want you to imagine the worst person that you've ever met on Wall Street. That is the best person in Washington. I mean, we're a bunch of babies on Wall Street compared to these people. And so when they went to cut my throat, I got myself in a little bit of a bind. I let my pride get the better of me. I went to Mr. Trump, then President Trump, and said, these are two bad guys. If you want to get rid of them, invite me back and I'll come and do that. And so he invited me in 6 months later to be the comms director. I was ill-suited for that job, even though I can present on television. I don't really have communications experience in DC, should have never taken that job, but I took it. And then the fight started. We had a shootout at the OK Corral between me and Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon. I said something really funny, but
what did you say?
Well, I don't want to say it on your show. I mean, you guys can Google it, but I said something about Steve Bannon and something that he was capable of doing to himself anatomically, which if you know anything about Steve Bannon and his girth and the fact that he doesn't do hot yoga, he probably couldn't do what I said. And a result of which the reporter recorded that and reported it on CNN. John Kelly, the chief of staff, fired me for those remarks, deservedly so. And so I think I made those remarks on day 8. I think I was fired on day 11. And so what's the lesson there is take accountability for your mistakes. I made a mistake. I got fired, never blamed anybody for it. And, was also trying to be helpful to the administration and the Republican Party after my firing. No villains there, no victims. I take total responsibility for my firing. But prior to those 11 days, and for the last 33 years, less those 11 days, I've been a money manager, an investment manager since I left law school. I started at Goldman Sachs. I built a company after I left Goldman, sold it successfully, and then started Skybridge 16 short years ago. And so that's really what I've been doing for most of my life. So when they're trying to cancel you, this is a learning lesson for people that watch your show.
Yeah.
When they're trying to cancel you, if you're an entrepreneur, it's very hard to get canceled because they fired me. I dusted myself off and went back to work at my own company.
Yeah, cancel culture is rife right now. I can even tell you it's kind of rife within the Bitcoin community. I had some canceling of myself yesterday. It was quite the learning curve.
Who's trying to cancel you, Layah?
The CEO of Swan Bitcoin, he canceled me yesterday. So we'll just get that one out there. It hurt my feelings.
You'll get over it. Listen, we
will.
We're in a rough environment. I don't take myself that seriously. Here's my Thanos cup in case you need some energy here. See that? I mean, why take yourself that seriously? And just remember, in the immortal words of Mel Brooks, the 95-year-old American comedian, relax. None of us are getting out of here alive. So try not to take things too seriously.
No, I totally agree with you. But speaking of not taking yourself too seriously, that is something that good old Donald Trump never did. So he's a bit of a controversial character. So I do want to get into Bitcoin, but before we do, I do want to get like a brief understanding of what he's like to work with, because I watched some interviews and you sort of played off this character that's not empathetic, but at the same time is deeply sensitive to criticism and ridicule. So what kind of character is he like?
It's not personal. My decision to break away from Mr. Trump and my decision not to back him in the 2020 election, really not personal. It's an evaluation. So let me just put it to you this way. Let's say the two of us were on the board of a publicly traded company, either in the UK or the United States. We had to pick a CEO. We had selection criteria, but unfortunately, we were only down to 2 choices. And so we could only pick these 2 people to be the CEO of our company. And we chose Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump had several years where he was operating as CEO and he was manifesting himself in the way that he did through his Twitter account, the bellicosity of his rhetoric, the insanity of his hiring and firing process. Then you and I would have to say, as responsible board members, this is not good. This is ill-suited to be that CEO. And then, of course, once again, you only have 2 choices. So you have to choose between the existing CEO, who I think is an abject failure, or potentially somebody else. And so
you could also be a failure.
Possibly, but I don't think so. I think he's doing a pretty good job. I mean, he's 6 weeks. Yeah, he's 6 weeks into it. He's a calm guy.
Already.
I'm sorry?
Bombed Syria already.
He bombed Syria already. Yeah, the United States, whether people like this or not, is going to probably protect its interests militarily around the world. Now, people can like that or dislike it, but it's a fairly bipartisan thing, whether it's Barack Obama, more drone strikes in the first 3 years than the Bush administration's 8 years, whether it's a left-leaning political administration or a right-leaning political organization. It's likely going to protect its interests militarily overseas, irrespective. You could like or dislike that. I'm just being observant about that. If you want my opinion about it, I'm happy to share it, but that's really something that's going to happen. That's an axiomatic fact of American foreign policy, whether people like that or not. But listen, he's not Donald Trump, and so he's not offering this insanity on Twitter. I think John Kelly, the gentleman that fired me, who I developed a very close relationship to, says it better than anybody, and I'll quote from him. You don't realize how crazy Donald Trump is until you're inside that 1 degree orbit of his space. Once you're inside that space and you're operating alongside of him, you're like, okay, wait a minute, this guy's ill-suited to be president. He doesn't have the personality makeup or the integrity or the bandwidth towards things like empathy, emotion, and things like that to really be the president. So I made a mistake. We move on. But you're asking me about him. I'll tell you about him. He's a very complex, wounded guy. He's remarkably insecure. I guess I didn't see that when he was in his area of competence, which is being a raconteur, a radio, television, reality host. But when he was put in the position of the head of state of the world's most powerful military and one of the world's most powerful economies, you got to see the manifestation of his full-blown insecurity. And so he couldn't handle people around him that may have had expertise and or opinion that was more sophisticated than his. He tried to steamroll those people, or in the immortal words of General McMaster, who served as his second national security advisor, he always was counterintuitive, which was a way of saying, I'm too insecure to hear your opinion, so I'm going to steamroll you. So very ineffective as a leader, failed the country, 13 million jobs lost during his 4-year term. He made the country sicker. He mishandled and malpracticed on the pandemic. We had 670 deaths per million in the United States over the last year, compared to a place like South Korea, where there were only 20 deaths per million in South Korea. So we did 30 times worse than a country like South Korea due to mismanagement of COVID-19. He's an abject liar. 34,000 lies were told during that period of time. Wow. He weakened our alliances, not only the alliance with the UK, but I would say just about every alliance that we built since the end of the World War II. He praised despots and dictators and people that subject their populations to a lack of freedom, and he denigrated democratic leaders. So I think all in all, I'm relieved to see him go, and I'll be around to make sure he doesn't come back.
Wow, some really strong opinions. I have some
I think I'm holding back. I haven't had my coffee yet. I'm drinking hot and cold
That's
coffee.
you holding back. Damn.
But I think I'm holding back a little bit. I have a tendency to be fairly shy and reserved. So I'm just holding back here.
If we had more time, I'd debate this with you because I think it's a pretty interesting one. But I want to just kind of move a little bit onto.
Let's have the debate. So it's apparently you like him. Have you ever met him?
No, it's not that I like him. I'm just less of a fan of Biden. That's all. Like I'm less of a fan of Biden. That's kind of the difference.
You're saying that President Trump.
I understand the lesser of the two evils.
You're saying he's the lesser.
Essentially.
Yeah, that's because you got to do more. You got to do more homework. Interview more people. Yeah, you got to interview more people that were in Mr. Trump's inner circle, so that you could see his full-blown psychosis and you could see his full-blown lack of empathy, his full-blown incapability of making good decisions, his lack of executive management and functioning skills, and the fact that he's a sociopath. Whatever you think of President Biden, he's not a sociopath. And so I think, I'm interested in making money and taking care of my family and protecting the people I love. I would prefer not to have a sociopath sitting on top of the world's most powerful military. So no, I'd be very happy to have that debate with you.
I would love
very
to,
happy
but
to have that debate with anybody.
I'd love to, but
thank God 81 million people in the United States agree with me. And by the way, despite what I'm saying, Mr. Trump almost won that election. It was only a 71,000 vote differential among those battleground states.
I'd love to debate it with you, but I cannot because I know we have a time cap on this. And I do want to talk about Bitcoin because that's the most interesting thing right now. At the moment, Trump is old news. Right. So, okay, kind of moving on from that, Biden is going to pump 9 trillion into the US economy. So we've seen a crazy amount of money printing over the last year with the whole pandemic. So I just want to get your perspective on that and how you think that's going to affect the US dollar. And then we'll kind of move into Bitcoin.
Well, I think it's important to give a little bit more of a historical allegory so that you can understand why we're in Bitcoin and also why we're so bullish on Bitcoin. And I'm going to take you back to 1944 to Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. And in 1944, as the world was beginning the process of entering the post-World War II era, and what to do with the industrial economies, some of which were damaged in the war, the economists, leaders, people from trade around the world, trade associations, et cetera, got to Bretton Woods and made some decisions. And what was clear, whether you were a liberal economist or a conservative economist, what was clear was that we wanted something, and we wanted a term that we never use anymore, Layla. It is a purchasing power parity. And so what the economists said, if we want to promote global trade and peace and prosperity and raise living standards, the currencies, the global currencies, have to be in a trading band. We can't let any of these industrial nations manipulate their currencies, i.e., cheapen their currencies on a relative basis so that they can increase their exports. And so if you go back to Bretton Woods, I think it's very, very important, because over that 27-year period where Bretton Woods held, you had tremendous economic growth, very high prosperity numbers per capita, and you had rising living standards and a rising middle class. In 1971, the United States made a decision to break from Bretton Woods and unclip the US dollar from the gold standard. And so just so everybody understands that, $35 an ounce for gold, 1971, $17 or so $100 an ounce today. We crushed the US dollar. We took it from reasonably good purchasing power to a full monetization. And so let me just give that number. $2 in 1971 have $100 of 2021 dollars of purchasing power. So, we crushed the US dollar. During that period of time, China manipulated its currency as well, which helped them become a mercantilist export economy. And in 2008, we flooded the system with US dollars to prop up the system after the global financial crisis. So Satoshi Nakamoto, or those people that are known as Satoshi Nakamoto, refined digital currencies. There were several digital currencies, but they got it almost perfectly right with Bitcoin, and they sent it into the marketplace. They developed a white paper, which I recommend to everybody that they read. And he basically explained, if we don't get back to some kind of standardized currency for the world, we are jeopardizing living standards around the world. And that is true in the UK and in the United States. So after the introduction of Bitcoin, 12 years later, the United States has pumped and devalued its dollar, but so has the British Central Bank, and so has the European Central Bank. And there has been global central banking coordination to monetize debt and to flow tremendous amounts of dollar production or currency production around the world. That helps rich people. It hurts poor and middle class people, and it's manifested itself in nationalism. It's manifested itself in populism, and it's led to the rise of political leaders, failed political leaders, I might say, but the rise of them, like Donald Trump. And so this time around with the pandemic, because we have weak political leadership in the West and no one wants to develop an industrial policy, a manufacturing policy, an education policy, they just want to be solely reliant on monetary policy, we're producing more dollars to try to solve this problem. In the last 6 months, the volume of money supply in the United States is up 26%. So I just want to stop and have everybody take a look at that. We have 26% more dollars produced in the last 6 months than we had in the prior 244 years. If the stimulus that you referenced earlier goes through, the $1.9 trillion stimulus, we will have 40%.
Wow.
That's another 14% increase in dollar volume. You'll have 40%. So where is it going to show up? It's going to show up in asset prices, expensive real estate, collectibles, things like that. But where it's not showing up is in wages. It's not showing up in middle and lower middle income, real income. And so
can you talk more just about that point? because I actually was talking about this the other day, and I sort of said I think, you know, a healthier way to stimulate an economy is to lower taxes rather than print more money. And somebody had mentioned, if you print more money, then how will people, you know, well, if you lower taxes, people don't have money to pay, basically. So what I'm saying is, if you're able to
listen, you could expand the earned income tax credit, the EBIT. And so what could happen is, at a certain number, you're making money in your job where you're not paying any taxes. So could that be $50,000, $70,000, $80,000, and all of a sudden you're increasing the living standards for the bottom part of the pie? Yes. But I think that the point that someone was probably pushing back on you with is, with 27 million people out of work born from the pandemic, if they're not making any money, doing that doesn't really help them, because, you know,
but like you said, printing money doesn't exactly create jobs for the poor.
No, you would, if you were really thinking about a way to help the poor, you would have to have at the intersection. The United States and the UK have been at its best when there's an intersection between public spending and the private sector economy. That happened after World War II. As an example, in the US, 16 million people, servicemen and women, accepted the GI Bill. So they either got money to buy a farm, they got money to participate in a liberal arts education or an engineering education at our nation's colleges. And it laid the groundwork for a very burgeoning middle class. We're doing none of that. Our bridges, roads, and tunnels are in decay. Our airports are in decay. They look like third world countries. Our K through 12 educational system is very uneven. If you live in a good zip code in the United States, in an affluent area, you can get a good public school education. If you live in a inner city or with a poor tax base around the school, forget it. The kids get passed from grade to grade and they have no real skills. If anything, they have remedial math and remedial reading skills. And so this is downward shifting the intelligence of the society, and it's making it harder for those people to get high wage paying jobs. So you're in a difficult situation. And so it does dovetail into Bitcoin, because that white paper, which was a brilliant piece, is basically suggesting that if you can scale a decentralized monetary network, you will put to rest the policy whimsy of politicians. And so, obviously, what is the opposite of a central bank? A decentralized network. And so that network is scaling. There's 100+ million users today for Bitcoin. By 2025, there could be 1 billion users. And if we're right at Skybridge Capital, if our economic team is right, Michael Saylor is right, and others, what you will see is a full-blown decentralized monetary network. And in many ways, that will help the world, not hurt the world. The central bankers are threatened by it right now. But if they really study it, they'll recognize going back to a Bretton Woods-like construct is better for the world. There's more fairness if we have purchasing power parity, and governmental policymakers or politicians in their respective states are not trying to manipulate the manufacturing and export game to benefit them. And so hopefully that can happen. It's happening, whether people—
I'm going to jump in. Though. I just want to go back though, because when did you first hear about Bitcoin, and what was it about Bitcoin as opposed to the other cryptocurrencies, like ETH, for example, that made you think, I want to dedicate an entire fund to that? I kind of want to, if you can bullet point maybe the 3 or 4 biggest things other than decentralization that really kind of made sense to you.
So introduced to Bitcoin in 2013. By 2014, it's $400 a coin.
Yeah.
I'm an institutionalist. I know I can't sell that product to my clients because it's not fully scaled. So Bitcoin needed 3 things to have happen for us to get involved. 1, it had to continue to adopt on the scale of Metcalfe's law and grow the network exponentially. It has done that. 2, it needed to be regulated or taxed. In the United States, it's taxed as an intangible. It's not yet completely regulated, but that process is happening. i.e. there's an ETF in Canada, or now 2 ETFs in Canada. I expect by the end of this year, there'll be an American ETF approved by the SEC. And then the third thing, which was super important for Skybridge, was storage. You and I both know about the tragedy of people losing their coins on their phones, laptops, SIM cards, etc. Skybridge Capital has $500 million in Bitcoin. We have it stored at Fidelity in their digital asset space. It's ring fenced in cold storage, so it's off the grid, and it's protected by Fidelity, their team, their balance sheet, as well as an insurance layer from Lloyd's of London. So if you're going to have institutional investments in Bitcoin, you're going to need that type of protection. Why that versus the others? This is just our opinion. Bitcoin is the big dog. Bitcoin originated 12 years ago. There's been 8,300 crypto competitors to Bitcoin that Bitcoin has slayed. You tell me, because I'm just guessing at current market prices, it's roughly 80% of the market share of crypto assets that's out there. And so that's evidence to us that it has defeated the other competitors in the space. It's the big kahuna in the space. And since we're institutionalists and we're going to have a hard enough time migrating people to crypto in general, let's start with the biggest one and let's stay on that for a while. Perhaps you'll invite me back in a few years and we'll have other cryptocurrencies in our funds, or maybe we'll have funds specific to those other cryptocurrencies. I don't know. But right now we're going to just stick with Bitcoin.
So with all of that in mind, then, there's this kind of big rivalry between gold and Bitcoin. And a lot of people say that Bitcoin is gold 2.0. So I'd really like your opinion, given your background, why you think people like Warren Buffett and Peter Schiff just can't get on board with it.
Well, it has to do with FUD, right? You know the term fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So we have FUD, and then we have fuddy-duddies. And so what Peter Schiff and Warren Buffett represent in that space are fuddy-duddies. It's hard for me to quibble with Warren Buffett because he's one of the greatest investors ever. At age 90, however, he's looking at the world a certain way, and that certain way has made him successful. So far be it from me to be critical of him. However, I'll take your listeners and viewers back to a seminal Buffett story. In 1999, I was present at the Sun Valley Allen and Company Media Conference. A gentleman by the name of Jeff Bezos was making a presentation related to Amazon. And he was explaining that he was not going to focus on earnings. He was going to borrow and spend money to scale his network so that he could become the internet seller of all things. That was in 1999. Mr. Buffett said, okay, that sounds great. I'm not a buyer. I don't believe in your story. Why don't you believe in my story? Well, I can't tangibly price it in net present value of a discounting stream of earnings because you're not going to be making any money for 10 years. And Mr. Bezos said, well, I don't want to make any money for 10 years because I want to expand and grow the footprint. Mr. Buffett said, no. Who's been a better capital allocator in the last 20 years, Mr. Bezos or Mr. Buffett? And so we know that it's Mr. Bezos. And we know that a $10,000 investment in Amazon in its initial public offering in May 15th of 1997 is now worth $21,140,000. And so the point being is you can miss things as an investor and still be a very successful investor, legendary in Mr. Buffett's case. As it relates to Peter Schiff, he's stuck on gold. That's part of his business. I like Peter, but I think that they are intellectually not willing to accept where the world is going, and the world is going digital. And people of your generation, frankly, are more comfortable in the digital world than people that were born in the 1930s, 40s, or 50s, or even perhaps the 60s. So as the world is changing, certain things are going to be more valuable than others. And I think they're missing this because they are fuddy-duddies and they're not willing to be neurally plastic and adapt themselves to the new world.
Yeah, I think when somebody makes a fortune a certain way, they kind of like have that blueprint. And I think it can be so hard to adapt and sort of see something different.
I respect it. I respect it, but I disagree with it in this case. This is something that's
yeah, of
very
course.
obvious to me,
Oh,
and it's
I see.
something that people should, if they're listening, buy a small amount of it. Don't buy enough of it where it could ruin your living standard, but buy enough of it where you have a toehold in it. You'll learn more about it, and you'll be recognizing that you don't own enough of it. That's Michael Saylor's line. The first Bitcoin is the hardest to buy, but once you own it, you're like, okay, I don't own enough of it. I have to figure out a way to own more.
But that is so true. And I don't know anybody that doesn't agree. Every single person always hesitates before buying the first. And then they have to buy more. But you said on CNBC that you think Bitcoin could get to 100K this year. So I want to get your thoughts on that. And also, given the amount of institutional interest and institutional money just flowing in, how long really do you sort of see this bull market going? And how high?
If you look at other halving cycles, of course, this halving cycle completed last May. You probably have another 24 or so months related to this halving cycle. And usually that's when you get the upside swings in Bitcoin. But you have something new happening right now because of the amount of users. We're in the 100 million plus user zone, and it's edging into $1 trillion in terms of its market cap. It got there a week or two ago. It's receded from that. You're now scaled. It is now is important for institutional investors to take a look. Some of the institutions I've talked to have said, well, if I'm not long Bitcoin, I'm effectively short it because at some point it'll be part of the index, and I better make sure that I've got some of it if I'm going to be compared to it. And so that supply-demand imbalance, I think, will push Bitcoin through $100,000 by the end of the year. Remember, Bitcoin went from last March to $3,000 a coin, $4,000 a coin, to $48,000 a coin. So it's not that big of a move when you think about the fact that 3 million coins have been lost. There are 2-ish million coins left to be mined. And so let me put this supply-demand balance in stark numbers. There are 46 million global millionaires, 46 million. There are probably only 17 or so million Bitcoins available. You don't even have enough Bitcoin for each millionaire in our society to own one coin. And so if you put it in that context, you can see that there's going to be heavy supply-demand imbalance. It's a fairly scarce asset. It's a trusted asset now from a value transfer perspective because these cryptographs over that network, okay, is what people are looking for in terms of the certainty of value transfer. And so it's decentralized. You can take it outside of the banking industry. You can take it outside of the auspices of all of that onerous regulation. It becomes very compelling. And, I'm optimistic. Now, having said that, I said 100,000 by year end. The fuddy-duddies I was talking to were like, whoa. But then when you go on Twitter, I'm getting yelled at by people on Twitter.
Yeah, that's conservative.
I'm not bullish enough. So
yeah, that's very conservative.
It's somewhere. I'm somewhere in the middle. We'll get it right.
Yeah, for sure. Just lastly, because I know we are pushed for time, unfortunately, but Tim Draper, he said that he believes Netflix could be the next major company institution to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet. So I wondered who you thought would be the next institution to do this.
Say it one more time because I lost you there for a second about Draper. Draper is bullish on Bitcoin. Yep.
Yeah, but he said Netflix would be the next institution, the next company to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet. So I'm wondering who you think is next: Amazon, Apple, Netflix.
It's a good question. I'm not sure. Somebody asked me point blank if I thought Apple would add Bitcoin to its balance sheet. I said yes. Now I'm going to be 50-50. It's either going to be yes or no. But the reason I'm suggesting Apple is that they want to be in the wallet business. They've got a credit card now. They're making it easy for you to use your credit cards over this phone. And the notion that if they start to own and understand Bitcoin, and we eventually get, which I predict we will, a digital dollar and a digital yuan, you have you could have Bitcoin sitting on your phone alongside of a digital dollar, a digital yuan, even a digital share of Walmart, if you will. And so, you're in this situation where Apple will likely be somebody that owns or starts to own Bitcoin. But again, I don't have any information related to that. I could see why he's saying Netflix. They've got a lot of cash on their balance sheet. They're cutting edge enough to look at it. They've made some changes to their business model several times. And so they're adaptive people. Take a look at Square. Take a look at what Jack Dorsey's doing there. Bitcoin is going to be a part of the future, whether Peter Schiff likes it or not, or people that don't. Bitcoin deniers are going to be disappointed. I'm a Bitcoin investor. I was once a Bitcoin skeptic that has become a Bitcoin investor. I'm not a Bitcoin evangelist. I think that, it's not like Jesus and Moses got together and had a baby and it happened to be Bitcoin. I'm not a Bitcoin evangelist, but I see the strengths and weaknesses of Bitcoin. But I recognize that this is a big part of our future. And if we're right, it could have exponential growth from here that I want to take advantage of for myself and my customers.
I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's been so interesting. I do have so many more questions I want to ask you. So we will have to
invite me back, Layla. I appreciate it. Congratulations on your show. Be well.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.